everyone. My name is Oliver Glass. I'm the chair of the Medical Scientific Advisory Board for the DYRK1A Syndrome International. I'm a parent of a child with DYRK1A syndrome. My son Ethan was diagnosed in 2020. I'm also faculty at Duke and a drug development researcher in pharmaceuticals. So I just wanted to give a quick update on what we're doing with the National Scientific Advisory Board, so everybody's kind of aware of what's happened, where we're going, what we've done. So as you're all aware, our community keeps growing. We're predominantly founded in the United States, and that's mostly because of it's easier to get diagnosed. Oftentimes, many of us have been through the long journey of even getting the diagnosis and know that it's not easy. Oftentimes requiring whole exome or whole genome sequencing or a specific panel. And that's after you've done probably a million other things. So we know that there's probably more of us out there. And so we're obviously pushing for a number of different capacities to increase diagnosis rate. So the Medical Scientific Advisory Board, we're all volunteers, and it's composed of a broad range of expertise. So there's myself, Craig, who's in the back, Amelie Tom, my wife, Breji Bon, as well as Amy. And so this really ranges from like early expertise and preclinical development all the way up to Breji, who takes care of patients with DYRK1A syndrome. So, you know, our purpose is really to keep your interests in mind as we move forward with understanding the latest research and how we can improve areas of focus for DYRK1A syndrome, which I'll cover briefly. So we, a few years ago, developed some key objectives for our Medical Scientific Advisory Board. The first is to deepen the understanding of individuals affected with DYRK1A syndrome. And this is through a number of different ways, through natural history study, cross-sectional studies, really just understanding what the clinical presentation is of our loved ones. The next is to establish a drug development toolkit and a path to therapeutics. So this is absolutely critical to developing a therapy for DYRK1A syndrome, which I'll touch upon soon. And then the third is to establish the research funding mechanism. So as Amy mentioned, we had our first grant awardee last year, and the idea is that we're going to continue to build upon this as we move forward. Yesterday, we heard from a number of different researchers in fly models and mouse models and patient samples, you know, all the way through the gamut. And I think what it tells you is that there is research being done in DYRK1A syndrome. It's growing, and we're, as an organization, looking to expand upon that. Also, I just want to briefly mention, I think there's two research studies that are ongoing that are going to be happening today. One is from Helen Wilsey. So she presented yesterday. She's from UCSF, and she's interested in, it's a non-invasive measure of looking at nitric oxide, like blowing out of the nose, essentially. I think it's like a 30-second test, but she can give you more information on that. And then Jan Harrell is here. He came all the way from France, and he's interested in taking some photographs of the faces of those affected by DYRK1A syndrome. So if those are things that you might be interested in participating in, I think they're going to be around, and they're going to have some consent forms. I think Jan's over there with his hand raised. If you're interested in participating. The fourth is defining centers of excellence. So centers of excellence are areas that have significant experience in treating individuals with DYRK1A syndromes for symptom management and really just overall management. So I'll put a plug in. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is probably an area that we haven't made as much progress in the past year. So if you have a clinician that you work with who has worked with other individuals with DYRK1A syndrome, has good sort of resources and infrastructure at their academic or medical center. Please get in touch with me or email me about it, so we can try to move forward with developing these centers of excellence. Because what we want to do is be able to define these, especially in the United States, so we have known expertise of where we can go to for treatment and management of individuals with DYRK1A syndrome. And then lastly, to educate and communicate to the community. And we've done this through some of our virtual research roundtables that have been happening quarterly, what we're doing sort of right now, and you know, educating you guys on what we're up to. But we're going to continue to build upon this in the future. So we've been adding to this over the past year, and I'll touch upon each one of these areas a little bit further. For our natural history and cross-sectional data, so you'll hear from Emily Newhouse today, who's involved with the Tiger study. This is a cross-sectional study, so it's really a snapshot in time. I think they're looking to build upon this and to do more longitudinal data. But you know, what we need as a community is really not to just understand, like you'll do a single survey or a single point in time. What we need is to capture data as our loved ones, you know, increase in age over time, because really at this point we have no data to support any sort of trajectory of those that are affected by DYRK1A syndrome. So we just have random snapshots in time of individuals that are either, you know, young or middle-aged or older, but we can't really track that progression over time. And we really need that information as a community in order to really better understand, once we develop a therapy, what things are important to our community over time. Does it change over time? Are there certain things that are important when they're younger versus they're older that we need to focus on? And are those going to be the important outcomes that we want to measure when we're running a clinical study, for instance, or we want to see a measurable change? We can't just say, oh, we think they're going to, you know, say a couple more words, or maybe they're going to walk a little bit better. We have to have measurable changes in order to really assess whether, you know, a potential therapy is efficacious or not. We've sort of put a plug in before for RareX. I'll talk a little bit about what we've done in RareX so far. But this is really kind of like our registry, if you will, right now. I think there's like 12 individuals in it or so, give or take, that have actually submitted a genetic report. So submitting a genetic report that you got when you were diagnosed with DYRK1A syndrome is really important, because it defines what the mutation is that you had. And this is important, like when we're trying to assess different sort of outcomes. So I think there's, you know, maybe 60 or so folks that are on the platform itself that have filled out surveys, but very few have submitted a genetic report. So if you haven't, I would, you know, I think we have we did a research roundtable on like how to submit that, but if you know, need any more information on how to submit that to RareX, you can just shoot me or Kellen an email. We'll also talk a little bit about combined brain or biorepository. So a couple years ago, we asked you to participate in research and submit blood samples. And so we did a proteomics project on that. Kellen gave an update on it yesterday. And so this is trying to sort of look at, as an exploratory measure, a biomarker of DYRK1A syndrome. So is there something that we can measure in the blood that may assess a change in individuals with DYRK1A syndrome? And this is kind of important also as you go into clinical research to see, you know, does this biomarker change with severity? Is this something that's going to change if we introduce a potential treatment? So this is just a real brief overview of some of the surveys that are on the RareX platform. As you can see, They're in sort of quality of life and communication, some measure seizures, sleep, and GI symptoms. And a lot of these are capturing some of the most important things that affect our loved ones. And so a lot of these, actually, I think all these are, no, actually, most of these are validated instruments, meaning that they have a good sensitivity and specificity to really measure what they're intended to measure. But this is like really critical because again, this is like information that we need to carry forward to better understand our community and better understand our loved ones that are affected by DYRK1A syndrome. So if you get on the RareX platform, some of these surveys are kind of long, but I encourage you to fill them out. And, we're also going to try to put a plug into, if you can fill them out annually. I think there's some sort of cadence to some of them. And so if you can fill those out, we'd really appreciate it. This is just a quick poll of the RareX registry, kind of what it's saying. It's really difficult to see right now, but what you can see is that these are the top symptoms that are reported, sort of the domains, and we're reporting cognitive impairment, constipation, eating difficulties, autism, spectrum disorder, coordination issues, seizures, and so on. But like the important aspect is like this is really trying to give a snapshot of what's impacting our community and what we should focus on in terms of research priorities and further development to understand. So our current research in therapeutics, so I just have like a brief slide on some of the proteomics in this disease concept model. But so the proteomics project was what I was talking about. We looked at thousands of different proteins in the blood from blood samples that were given a couple years ago and led to identification of a couple biomarkers that we're still looking into for DYRK1A syndrome. So we appreciate your participation in that, and we're going to continue to build upon that work. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then we have our disease concept model. So we were working on this with a graduate student or a master's student at Vanderbilt in genetic counseling, Olivia Selverson, as well as Kellen and the Combined Brain. And really and many of you participated in this, and the disease concept model was really gathering information through interviews with families and really trying to get at the crux at what's important to you in terms of what you're dealing with DYRK1A syndrome. And is that different than what clinicians are reporting? Is that different than what is reported in the literature? And if it is, let's highlight that. And if there's things that are, let's say, for instance, in that RareX registry, all the surveys I was talking about for, seizures and sleep and GI, if there's something that we're missing that we're not capturing, let's get a questionnaire or survey to try to capture that data, because if it's important to you, then that's something that we want to understand better and focus on that moving forward as a key priority. And so for the proteomics project, actually I'll talk about that in a second. So the ICD-10 code is next. So we worked on so currently we don't have an ICD-10 code for DYRK1A syndrome, and you're wondering like what is an ICD-10 code? So this is something that's really important for reimbursement of services through insurance companies, as well as accurate diagnoses basically across the board. And your ICD-10 code is attached to a number of different elements in your medical health record. And so this is going to help us pinpoint more information from the electronic health record that's associated with DYRK1A syndrome. For instance, like what are individuals getting treated with? How are they being managed? And not only that, but how insurance companies, can recognize these ICD-10 codes for reimbursement. So for instance, our son had a surgery for dental work, and this was something that, required like sedation and like the whole 9 yards. which isn't typical for, a lot of kids, under your sort of dental insurance, but, having a proper ICD-10 code that you can submit to your medical insurance company that would cover things like the anesthesia or anything that's required for other services would be really important. So there's actually a meeting that's going to be happening this fall. They're going to be reviewing the ICD-10 code. This is through the Department of Health and Human Services, and fingers crossed that we get an approval for having an ICD-10 code. Craig talked about the ASO N1 project from NLORM yesterday. So this is basically a proof of concept project right now of developing a targeted treatment for an individual with DYRK1A syndrome. So they have a very specific mutation. Craig and NLORM are developing a therapeutic that's going to target that mutation and hopefully lead to one of the first individuals treated for DYRK1A syndrome. If anybody, is interested in potentially, following that path, I would encourage you to just reach out to Craig, and he can put you in touch with, folks at NLORM, or you can go through the process of understanding how to make a submission to NLORM to potentially get a treatment developed. The last is sort of this upregulation of DYRK1A. So this is a primary focus of the Medical Scientific Advisory Board. Many of you are aware that DYRK1A syndrome is called a haploinsufficiency syndrome. So basically, you're not producing enough of the DYRK1A protein. It's many of you heard it's like Goldilocks gene. So you can't really have too much or sort of too little. It's got to be just right. And so, a big strategy, there's a number of different ways you can do this, and I'm happy to talk with anybody after about specifics, but our ultimate goal is to try to increase DYRK1A protein in the body, and hopefully that's going to have a positive impact on a number of different outcomes. And those outcomes, that's why we want to be able to measure things with the survey and be able to better understand that. So I'll put a plug in for that, but that's definitely a priority of us right now. So just to quickly kind of cover, this was the proteomics project that we worked with on Combined Brain. So they did analysis of a number of other neurodevelopmental disorders. And you can see DYRK1A right here. This was preliminary data at the time, and we found a biomarker called GFAP. But since then, they've kind of built upon that work, found a couple other biomarkers that they're looking at. So this is really important work, kind of building upon that next step of identifying something we can measure to look at changes or improvements in DYRK1A syndrome. This is also this kind of just a brief snapshot of this disease concept model, which is again focusing on sort of different domains like sleep and cognition and behavior. This is actually sorted by just age, but this is just kind of a snapshot that, again, we're, thanks to the community, we're improving research by better understanding this disease concept model. And, this is going to help supplement some of the areas that we have on Rare X. And hopefully, this is going to build a wealth of data that we can, then take forward to developing a treatment for DYRK1A syndrome. So I kind of already mentioned, we've had a number of successes in the past year. We've really been, moving things along quite well since, even last year and the year before. So we've made a lot of progress, and we look forward to making even more. I mentioned we've been doing these quarterly virtual research roundtables. So we did our first one. Kellen went over kind of understanding genetic variants, genetic reports, talked about uploading genetic reports to the RareX platform. We had Helen do the second one. So she was talking about DYRK1A in frogs and why understanding DYRK1A in frogs is going to be really helpful to understanding how it functions in the body. We're already working with a number of researchers to do the next one and thereafter. So and this is really meant for you all, to have our researchers who are in the DYRK1A space present to the community. There might be some science that goes over your head, and that's okay. But I think like the purpose too is to distill that down in a way that you understand, and that you understand that research is being done, what's going to be important to you moving forward, and how can we partner in that relationship. The great thing too is that in the past year, we had a special issue that appeared in a journal called the Frontiers in Neuroscience. This was a special issue in the journal that focused on DYRK1A syndromes. This is a great platform to get researchers to submit original research articles. So we had a number of research articles get submitted, and this was just a snapshot I think I did the other day. There was almost close to 2,000 downloads of these research articles. And what we want to do is we want to get as much research out there in DYRK1A syndrome, so that those that are interested in understanding or working with our gene, if you will, they can kind of see some work that's already been done and hopefully build upon it. Amy mentioned, so Craig was our first recipient last year of our competitive grants program. And these are one-year grants that are up to $30,000 per applicant. And we have sort of a process by which we review that as an MSAB. So all of us, review the one-page letter of intent. We review the full applications and then, discuss about awarding. So this is a great opportunity to encourage researchers that are out there to participate and to want to do research in DYRK1A syndrome. There's a lot that's been done in Down syndrome, which many of you have probably heard of. DYRK1A is on chromosome 21, and in Down syndrome they have 3 copies of DYRK1A. So there's a lot of research that's been done in that. So I think, the purpose of this too is like, if there's researchers that are well established in Down syndrome that have expertise in DYRK1A, the gene, that they may say, oh yeah, this would be interesting to look at something more specific in DYRK1A syndrome. So it's really to encourage research in that area. I won't go through all these. I kind of covered them yesterday, and these aren't really gonna land well, but we have a number of areas that are high priority that we want to focus on, that we believe are really going to be the key drivers of moving research forward in DYRK1A syndrome. So we've kind of established some guidelines to the grants process that we hope researchers are going to focus on. So we've already been doing a lot of work. We're very proud of what we've all been able to accomplish over the past year or so. Again, I'll put a plug in for the Centers of Excellence. So if you have, again, any clinicians that you're really fond of, that you believe, have a great understanding of DYRK1A syndrome and are, supportive, we want to talk to them. So I think that's it for me. So I just really appreciate your attention, and I really appreciate your participation in research, because that's really what is going to be the key driver for our community to move forward towards a potential therapy. So thank you again. Yeah.
You want to